Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to this week's edition of the podcast. This interview was recorded back in October of 2018 for a previous podcast that I was a part of. This is an interview with Frogdancer Jones, who in April of 2018, around Easter time, if my memory serves me correctly, traveled to North Korea. So this is an interview I believe stands the test of time, and I think is quite interesting today to still hear about it, and I think it's something that you will enjoy. Frogdancer, how are you?
Good, thanks.
Let's give the listeners just a 1 minute rundown, I would say, of who you are and what you're all about.
All right, my name's Frogdancer Jones. That is not my real name. It's a clever pseudonym, so people can't track me down on the internet.
Your parents, I mean, geez.
Yeah, who wants that? I've been blogging for about 11 years on a personal blog, dancingwithfrogs.wordpress.com, and I've recently started up a FIRE blog. It's Financial Independence Retire Early blog, burningdesireforfire.wordpress.com. I am in my mid-50s. I'm a single parent. I raised 4 boys on my own. I've been single for 21 years. And basically, now once I raised them and all on a teacher's wage and did all that sort of stuff, they're finally off my hands and I can start travelling, which is, oh my God, so good.
Which is, what we're going to be talking about today, because you've travelled somewhere that most people and in the entire world will never get the chance to see, which is North Korea.
Yes, that was earlier this year. And the way I got into that was really, really weird. A friend of mine who I work with, her son is a tour guide there. And last year she went over to North Korea for a week. And I thought she was mad. I mean, who would want to go over there? Just crazy. And then when she came back alive and showed all her pictures and stories, she just said to me, look, Frogdancer, it's like going back in time to the 1960s. And that really intrigued me. And I thought, I'd kind of like to see the bubble before it bursts, because I honestly, sooner or later, the borders are going to fall with North Korea. And to just be able to have a bit of a look at a country that is so removed from the current world. Like no internet, absolutely no internet, no free travel across the borders at all. There's no free travel in between various areas of the place too. You have to have permits and things like that if you're a citizen. So I just thought, let's just go back and have a look. And she came back with me, and I tell you what, it's fascinating.
So rather than jump straight into the trip, we've got your motivations for the trip, and I would be curious one day to see the differences to what it's like here. But what is the process you have to go through to get into the country? You would say, like applying, it's visas and things like that. It surely isn't the same as other places.
It isn't, I guess. You come in through North Korea from China, so you've got to have the normal Chinese visa and things like that. So you've got to go into the Chinese embassy and get all that stamped and everything, which is a bit of a pain. The tour company that I went with was Young Pioneer Tours. They organised the visas into North Korea. And basically you have to sign, they send out a document with what you can and can't do in the country, and you've got to sign that, because you do have to be very, very careful of cultural norms over there. And the visa is actually a little bit of paper. You don't ever get a stamp in your passport and things like that. So whenever we cross the border in and cross the border out, we'd hand our passports and this little paper visa with us, and that's what they use to process us, just the paper visa.
So, because I know if you go to North Korea, you're not allowed to, there's certain countries you're not allowed to go to after the fact, a bit like, if you go to Iran, you can't go to Israel, and vice versa, I think. I think it is with the US, right?
Yeah, apparently you've got to, if you want to go into the US, they've got a list of about 12 countries on the naughty list. So if I did ever want to go to the US, which I probably will one day, I'll have to go in and have a face-to-face interview with someone from the embassy, but that's okay.
It's a beautiful part of the world. I recommend it. Okay, so let's go through the. You've just. I'm seeing, so it's by train. You're in North Korea. What was your first view of the place?
Well, yeah, I went by train. You can fly in. The countryside is so poor. We were travelling for a full day before we got to Pyongyang. And we were travelling through farmland pretty much. So I don't think I saw a single tractor. I saw very few cars. People were ploughing their fields by oxen and hand digging trenches and things like that. It was snowing a little bit as we were going through. We were there in April, and people were lighting fires in the middle of the fields and just standing around warming up their hands and things like that. It was the colours of Australia. The ground was very orange and the foliage was very brown, but every single level surface was hand-tilled so that they could grow crops. They weren't wasting an inch of ground.
Okay. So in respects that you said it was like going back to the 60s early on, it in a way wasn't, especially in the poorer areas of the country.
Well, in Pyongyang, which is where we spent a lot of our time, obviously, they want to show
the best of their country.
Well, yeah. I mean, if we have foreign visitors here, we don't take them to the local tip. We take them to the Great Ocean Road and things like that. So in Pyongyang, we were shown the best of the best. So, for example, they've got the biggest indoor sports stadium in the world. It can seat 150,000 people.
With all the travellers there, it definitely gets used.
Yeah, well, people do come in. I mean, we flew in and took part in the Pyongyang Marathon. There were heaps and heaps and heaps of foreigners for the first few days that we were there. And because it's one of those marathons that people like to tick off their list. So, yep, we were there for that. And then, we got taken around to all the huge monuments and things like that. And Pyongyang itself is, it looks pretty good. It's absolutely beautiful. When you go up high and have a look in some of the towers, they've got all these huge concrete apartment blocks, and somebody was smart enough to actually paint them different colours. So when you go up on top of the Juche Tower or something and look out over Pyongyang, there's this candy-coloured city that stretches out. So there's buildings in pink and green and blue and yellow, and it looks beautiful. If they were just concrete, it would look like a disaster. But, yeah, that was pretty smart. But when you go out into the country, that's where you can see a different side to the countryside.
So it's clearly noticeable that Pyongyang's their centrepiece, and understandably so. Were you able to talk to a lot of the locals there? Because I know you have minders.
Yeah, well, what you're told is you have to stay with the group, and they ferry you from place to place. And honestly, I know, if that's the cost of going to see this place, then I was like, oh, well, okay, fair enough, I'll do that. And I was expecting us to be in a total little bubble the whole time, but it didn't work out like that. We were able to mix with the locals, particularly during the last few days when we were in Pyongyang for the celebrations of the president. That's their dead president. He's been dead for 20 years, and
Kim
he's still the
Jong-il's
president.
father.
Grandfather. Oh no, father. Yes,
Yep.
Kim Il-sung. So he's been dead a long time. Still their president. That's how good he is. And so they had fireworks to celebrate his birthday, and we were just out on the river, sitting around with the locals. We were talking with them. They were asking us questions. We were asking them questions. We were dancing in the park with the locals. They have the more formal massed dancing that we've all seen on documentaries and stuff, and we were able to get in with that and have a bit of a dance and a chat as well. And walking on the street, you can occasionally talk with people. surprisingly, English is taught in the schools there, and the older people, obviously, you'd be very lucky to strike somebody who can speak English, but a lot of the younger people can. So interesting.
So you're able to talk to the locals.
Yeah,
And
I even taught an English class when I was there, which was kind of funny.
because you are an English teacher
Yeah.
in Melbourne. Would you say like the classrooms were significant? Like obviously technology and things like that are going to be different, but would you say the students of that would they be different than here?
No, people are people. They really are. They were really curious about me. They were asking me about my life and what is the lifestyle like in Australia, and they were keen to hear what life was like outside the borders. And that's really what I found. They were very warm. They were very curious. I thought people would be scared to talk with us, but they didn't seem to be. And like I said, people are people. They love their kids. They love their parents. They definitely love their leaders. That's a little bit different to here. Yeah, there was just same old, really, with regard to education. What I did notice was, talking about education, I did a thing on my financial blog about how, I called it Advertising in North Korea, and I did 4 posts on it because I was really interested to see how the leadership, the Kim family, have been able to stay in power for the last 70 years. And honestly, their people love them. I was expecting that maybe there'd be cynicism and things like that, but they genuinely are adored. Even our guides who, they deal with foreigners all the time and they get to hear and see things that are around outside the borders, they still have this utter adoration of Kim Jong-un and Kim Il-sung in particular. It was very interesting to me to step back and have a look at the different ways that the regime has been able to make their people willingly undergo sacrifices and privations in order to keep them in power. And it's all very, very clever.
Okay. I was going to ask about the leaders, but beautiful. Tick. Would you say that the minders, the carers, the people showing you around, they were definitely showing you what they wanted you to see, rather than
definitely. Oh yeah, definitely.
Could you go off the beaten path? Could you break away from the group?
No. And you'd be silly to. I mean, honestly, if you, we all know what happened to that poor boy, the poor American boy a couple of years ago, who stepped away from the group and defaced a poster, which we were very strongly told, anything with the image of the leaders on it, you never screw it up, you never throw it in the bin. Like, no, you just don't. It's very disrespectful. So you don't, you'd be silly if you tried to run around on your own. And I think also it would be very unfair to the actual guides, because if somebody got into trouble by running around outside the group, those guides would lose their jobs. And it would, you've really got to be a bit sensitive to the local customs and things like that. Having said that, though, we were going on a hike up the top of a mountain when we were staying in this massive 6-star hotel in the middle of nowhere. We were the only guests. Our tour had 12 people in it. And there was more
like
staff
two or three
guests.
rooms for like...
Oh, look, it's crazy. It was crazy. But anyway, we were going on a hike up the mountain, and I'm not very fit. And after a while, I thought, my God, I'm going to have a heart attack and die if I keep trying to go up this steep path. And so I was allowed to go down the mountain on my own, and just go back to the bus. And it was actually amazing. Like, I just felt so fortunate. Like, I'm just a normal person who lives in suburban Melbourne, nothing flash, not famous or anything. And there I was in the middle of North Korea on my own, just walking quietly down a mountain path, taking photos, listening to the couple of birds, watching the sun go down. It was amazing. It was amazing. It was only later after I got back and I was doing more research. I did research about the country before I left, but I also did more coming back. I found out that I was 20 kilometres away from Camp 13, which was a bit scary because that's like a re-education camp. You can actually Google it. I mean, Google Maps it. You can see it on Google Maps. And
Okay.
so I was on my own. I heard soldiers singing in the distance, and we saw soldiers when we arrived, and I thought, that's why we saw them. Oh, my God. And that was a little bit creepy. But at the time, I just felt so lucky because who would ever think that just an ordinary person would be able to do that?
Visit, just a completely different part of the world. You did mention birds there. I was wondering, like, what's the wildlife like over there?
That was the creepy thing. And that's one of the things that you notice if you know your history. Because in the 1990s in particular, North Korea, with the collapse of the Soviet system, they didn't get any overseas help anymore. And they had a massive famine that killed millions of people. They just starved to death. And consequently, we hardly saw any wildlife. We didn't see any sort of wild animals. If we heard a bird, it was like, oh my God, did you hear that bird? It's just a reminder that, things were pretty bad. I'm imagining anything that flew or crawled or whatever was eaten.
Probably what's happening in Venezuela right now. Their country's gone to hell in a handbasket. Now, one of the big things from the outsider's point of view, which would be, me, and the media definitely portrays their nuclear program. Were you able to get any sort of read on the, like, I'm assuming you can't just bring that up to people.
No, you don't have to because they do.
Oh, really?
They are
Really?
so proud of the nuclear program. And this is part of the evidence that they tell themselves that Kim Jong-un is looking after them. Even when we went to the birthplace of their first leader, Kim Il-sung, and it was this little sort of farmer's hut that's been carefully maintained in the middle of Pyongyang. At the end of the whole thing about this is the ancient things that the Kim family used and this is what they did and blah, blah, blah. And then the guy just finished it off by saying, and this is proof that North Korea will soon be one of the preeminent countries in the world thanks to our illustrious leader Kim Jong-un's nuclear program, and it's bringing us to the forefront of the world. And I was like, what? One minute we're talking about, 1800s farming, and the next we're in the nuclear age. It was really quite jarring. And things like that happened quite a bit, where just when you relax and you're a tourist and you think, oh yeah, I'm seeing a country, then you would see something or hear something and it'd be a real shock and you'd think, oh, hang on, Dorothy, we're not in Kansas anymore. This is a strange country.
Yeah, well, that's the interesting thing is you've got a few propaganda posters that we're looking at as we speak, and they're very very proud of their nuclear program. I actually got one of because I've got photos of propaganda posters. I got one of them translated because somebody I know speaks Korean, and it was a photo of the White House with I'd say a target mark on the White House.
Oh, yeah.
With the American flag sort of ripped, and it sort of said, if they come for us, we'll come for them.
Oh, yeah, they're very, very, they've got a huge siege mentality. And part of you can understand where it comes from if you bother to dig into their history. Like for 150 years, they were, the whole Korean peninsula was taken over by Japan. And Japan pretty much raped and pillaged the country. It wasn't a fantastic thing. And then at the end of the Second World War, Japan obviously had to let that go, and then the country was divided down the middle. So South Korea was looked after by the Americans, and North Korea, the Russians put in Kim Il-sung, who was a major in their army. Now, the Korean people don't know that, the North Korean people. They think that he was a guerrilla fighter and he almost single-handedly engineered the expulsion of Japan from North Korea. That's the legend. But in reality, the Soviets put him in power. And I forget where I was going with that. What was the question? About the siege mentality. And then when the North Korean War, the Korean War happened in 1950 and to 1953, what really happened was that North Korea invaded South Korea, and they pushed through and nearly took over the whole country. And then the UN, along with America, pushed back and pushed the North Koreans right back to nearly the Chinese border. And then China had their back, and the division of the two countries, North and South Korea, was put back exactly where it was. What I found when I went to the War Museum was the North Koreans firmly believe that it was South Korea and the Americans who invaded. So they believe they were the innocents in all this. And then when the UN was fighting, the North Koreans actually lost 30% of their population in the Korean War. So they had about 7 million people die in that war. Now, if you're told...
In 3 years.
Yeah, in 3 years. So if you're told that you didn't start the war and you fought bravely and then you can imagine like 30% of the population gone, that means, anyone who's alive would have had family and friends that were gone. You really don't trust the outside world a lot. So when there's no internet, no way of contacting the outside world at all, you're told these things, you believe it. And so they firmly believe that they are the luckiest country in the world. Their leaders are looking after them night and day, and the Americans and the Japanese are not to be trusted.
So, yeah, the Japanese sort of beat them. They get a little brief bit of freedom, then America beats them. Therefore, they all band together in their loss, and they've spun the story to keep them sort of under the thumb. You did mention museums there. Were you able to see art or galleries or museums? And
we went to a lot of museums. We went to the War Museum, where it was quite weird. They have captured helicopters and jeeps and things like that from the Korean War proudly on display. Our guide, 3 times, she said, and the American aggressors with their 15 satellite countries, and then she'd list the satellite countries in order. Australia's number 3, by the way.
woo!
Bit embarrassing because he's standing right next to her, bit awkward. So we saw that, and one thing that really struck me was when we went to the art gallery, where we were going through all these rooms, and she was saying, and here is a copy of a tomb painting in 900 AD, and here's a copy of this and a copy of that. And I was starting to think, why are we seeing just copies? And then it dawned on me that, because I'm a bit slow, was that the Japanese would have looted them and taken them away. So a lot of their history...
Probably the war as well.
Yep, a lot of their history and their artefacts have been destroyed. So any that do survive, they are like precious, precious possessions.
Okay. So one of the main things you did tell me beforehand was that a lot of the roads, especially out of Pyongyang, were completely deserted, and to go to Pyongyang down to the DMZ, the demilitarized zone,
Yep.
You do have to take one of those roads, and I think that's a good segue to ultimately go to the DMZ. So how did you find the trip from Pyongyang down?
Well, that was, how did I find it? I got on the bus and he found it,
Well,
the driver. What they do have is a 6-lane highway built directly from Pyongyang right down to the border, so that, as we were told on the bus by one of our guides, when reunification happens and North Korea and South Korea are one country, we can get to Seoul as quickly as possible.
I'm assuming under North Korean rule.
And I thought,
yep.
oh my God, that would be, I don't know if they'd be quite happy about that. But yeah, it was interesting. We were driving down and we rarely saw even a single car. The sanctions have definitely taken effect. Even in Pyongyang, in what would normally be rush hour in any city, there's hardly any cars. And out in the country, virtually none. Like, it was sort of like, oh, here's a car coming along the other side of the road when we were driving.
Were they like significantly like dilapidated, or would they be like 60s style cars or up to the 90s?
It's not cool like
Cuba.
No, they're just normal cars.
Okay.
But in 4-wheel drive sort of stuff. But yeah, it's clear once you get out of Pyongyang that, I mean, the roads were in hideous disrepair, huge holes in them everywhere. We saw lots and lots of soldiers everywhere. And one of the things we had that we were told before we got in was that you are not allowed to take any photos of military people or buildings. But it's a bit hard because in North Korea the military are everywhere. And a lot of the time they're building stuff. They're fixing roads and working in the fields and things like that. So, yeah, I came back with heaps and heaps of photos of them. So, but yeah, the sanctions have definitely taken effect in regard to all that sort of stuff. And then we had an uninterrupted, no traffic jams on the way to the DMZ. That's where I bought my propaganda posters. And yeah,
so that's where the gift shop is, right at the border.
They have gift shops everywhere, like they really, really do. And it was fascinating going to the DMZ because in the Western world we're told that it's one of the tensest places on the planet and the war's never ended and there's soldiers, pointing their guns at each other and blah, 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 blah. And apparently I've heard from people that have been to South Korea, because I haven't been, that it is pretty tense. They whisk you in and whisk you out. But what happened with us, I mean, it was just so chilled on the North Korean side. It's so not what we're told. We were in the gift shop and I'm buying military hats and propaganda posters and things. And we had a Scottish guy on our tour and he's about 30. And I turn around and he's wearing a traditional Korean dress. A bright red, bright blue, this strapping man in this dress. And I said, what the hell are you doing? And he said, I bought it. It's mine. And he wore it the whole time at the DMZ. And when we left the gift shop, we were supposed to march in 2 lines to the bus, military style. I think it was supposed to make tourists, be a bit nervous. But we walked out and lined up. And I saw the soldiers, they were all looking straight ahead, and then one by one they'd flick their eyes sidewards to us and they'd see Neil, and everyone started to giggle. Like, we were, laughing. And the soldiers were standing there with their rifles by their sides and they're all going, and so we walked to the bus, everyone giggling, and we went to the DMZ. And he was standing at the front taking photos. We were taking photos. There were people on the South Korean side. I said to Neil, they probably think you're the ugliest Korean woman they've ever seen. And everyone was really, really chilled. After a little while, the only uptight soldier said, maybe we should take that off. So he did. But, yeah, it was just not what I expected at all.
Mm-hmm. I've heard that a lot of people give like donations in terms of art and things like that from various countries and people.
You mean gifts to the...
Gifts to the leader. Is it to the leaders or to the...
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That's common in diplomatic circles all over the place. Whenever somebody visits, like a politician or a member of the royal family or something visits, they always exchange gifts. And what the North Koreans have done is Kim Il-sung and the two after him have said, this is a gift for the people, not for us. So we are going to save them and exhibit them, in trust for the country. So what they did was they've built
That's smart.
massive, massive marble palace in the middle of nowhere. That's where we were staying at the 6-star hotel, so we could see this. Yep. And it has marble floors. It has like 15 feet ceilings, all marble walls, glass cases everywhere with the most amazing hodgepodge of gifts that you have ever seen. And our tour guide, there was quite a few Chinese tour groups there when we were there, and our tour guide found out which countries that we were from, and then she would take us to the various cases that would show Hungarian and Irish and Polish, Australian. We've given them a couple of boomerangs. Couldn't be more proud.
Did it say who? It would have been a specific leader, or was it just maybe from just a regular citizen? Or?
There's North Korean appreciation groups all over the world, Juche study groups and things like that. So, they send them stuff. And then governments send them. I think it was, from memory, Nicaragua sent them a stuffed mongoose with holding, or maybe it's a stuffed alligator. I think it was a stuffed alligator holding a set of wine glasses on a tray. Now, honestly, I can understand why they built a great big marble shed to put some of this stuff in, because honestly, you wouldn't want it in your house. But the lavishness, when you know that a lot of the population are really on the breadline, particularly out in the country, in the more remote areas, and you see the buildings that they put up for their own, to make themselves really grandiose, it's pretty obscene. It really is. After a while, you get to feel a bit uncomfortable if you know what's going on.
Okay. Are there any other sort of stories or notable things that are springing to mind now?
Well, there was the most interesting meal I've ever eaten in my life. That was, we went...
The final bird of North Korea. No.
Oh God, wouldn't that be awful? We did have pheasant when we were there, which I've never had before. That was quite strange. But no, we were... Now, was it on the same day? No, it wasn't the same day as the DMZ. Anyway, I can't remember now. But we were driving to a fishing village, and we had lunch, and always we were just... the spreads were lavish. They really fed us well. And then afterwards, they called us out onto the balcony. It was a concrete balcony, and they had clams, fresh clams, arranged in a circle where the openings were facing down. And then they doused the clams in petrol and set it alight. And then they just kept adding petrol until the clams were cooked, and then we had them. So I've eaten seafood cooked in petrol.
So you couldn't. There are questions here. Surely, I mean, you couldn't eat them with your hands. Surely.
Yeah. Well, what am I going to do? Yeah. You pick them up in your hands and you eat them. You did need serviettes because otherwise the petrol on your hands would get onto the clams. And it smelt a bit, like you should have seen the smoke coming off it. It was,
it's not like that petrol smell when you're filling up your car. So some people definitely like that sort of petrol smell.
Well, this petrol was being burnt, so it was pretty acrid smoke. And occasionally you'd taste a little bit of petrol, but in general, I mean, the clams were fresh. It was beautiful. And so we were washing it down with soju.
And what's that?
Soju is like rocket fuel. I reckon it's stronger than vodka. And that's pretty much what I drank when I was in North Korea, because I hate beer, and they don't have wine. It was very rare to find any wine there. And so, I got into the soju. I hopped into it and pretty much drank my way around North Korea. It was amazing. Our tour was, we were a lot of fun. We didn't hold back. It was good. I've never sung so much karaoke in my life, because once you get back to the hotel at the end of the night, you're not allowed to leave. So pretty much you go out and about during the day, and then you might have dinner outside the hotel, but then once you're driven back, you are not allowed to leave the grounds of the hotel. So what do? You go and sing karaoke. You have not lived until you've sung YMCA, but substituting the words DPRK in North Korea. It's fun to stay at the DPRK. And,
oh, my God.
well, when you're really half cut, it's hilarious.
Well, I can't think of a better note to leave us on. Frogdancer, thank you very much for being here.
Oh, no problem.
I hope that gives all you listeners a different take on North Korea. If you want to read more about the Frogdancer's time in North Korea, go to dancingwithfrogs.wordpress.com. It's April to August, you would say, is roughly of this year.
Yeah, I blogged it very, very thoroughly because I just didn't want to forget. And I wanted my children to read it too, to experience it with me.
Fair enough.
And it took me 5 months to blog this 10-day tour. But that's the fullest version of it. And then, as I think I said before...
There's Burning Desire for Fire. .wordpress.com. It's more of a financial blog. We might have to get you on to talk financy things maybe some other time. But it was August, September-ish, roughly. You did a 4-part.
Yeah, I did a 4-part thing specifically looking at how the regime has used advertising techniques that we are so familiar with here. There's no advertising in North Korea for products whatsoever. Every billboard and everything on TV is advertising the regime. So it's fascinating.
Okay, there we go. Anyway, thank you for listening. If you're listening to this on Apple's podcast services, click subscribe. Give us a 5-star rating if you like it. If you don't, you've got better things to do. You can just go on, carry on with your lives. It's fine. Same if you're on YouTube. Like, subscribe, click the notification bell for when new episodes go live. You will be notified, I think, via email. Have a great day.